Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining Lucy and I again for another of our conversations about some of the emerging issues around AI in education, which if you've watched any of our previous videos, you will know we are particularly energized about discussing and exploring further at the moment. So today we are taking the opportunity to do another interview. We're going to talk about a paper and some of the issues surrounding it. And we have with us Jack Hua, who is an undergraduate from Princeton University, who recently co-authored a paper called Comparative Analysis of Machine Learning and LLM Approaches for Detecting ChatGPT Written Essays Under Revision Conditions.
Well read.
Thank you. So obviously, this is a fairly significant issue at the moment. A lot of people in education are discussing this idea of the increasing prevalence of LLMs that students have access to, that educators have access to, and the impact of that on the ability for people to produce work using these LLM models and potentially gain some benefit from it, but also pass off work as their own without necessarily acknowledging that. So let us get started. Jack, what do you wish people knew about the current kind of landscape of AI detection?
I would say that first of all, most of people, especially educators or teachers or even school managers, overestimate the reliability of AI detectors. And a couple facts that I can conclude based on my paper is that detection of various models, either based on traditional machine learning algorithms or large language model-based algorithms, or even popular online platforms such as GPT-0 are strongest only for unedited AI text. That means when the students put some prompts into the ChatGPT or other generative AI platforms, the student just straight copy and paste it into his Word document and upload it. That's the easiest case. Most of the current state-of-art algorithms based on such as support vector machine or language model-based algorithms such as Electra are able to achieve extremely high performance, almost up to 99% accuracy on unmodified ChatGPT essays. But the situation changes when simple edits happens, especially when the student himself or he uses GPT-based humanizers or just Grammarly, which nowadays is able to paraphrasing the text as well. The rewritten AI essays with tools can reduce quadratic weighted kappa score, which is evaluation matrix. You can think same as accuracy score to almost a 30% drop. And also false positive and false negatives are real risks. False positive means that students write it with himself, but then the detected as machine generated. False negatives means the student utilize a generative AI during his writing process, but then he gets away with it without getting caught. And the false high precision rates and high recall rates are kind of plausible or convincible, but still it's not 100%, which means that under academic situations, some of the students can still get caught being used ChatGPT to write some of the essays, which in reality they didn't, or some students either cheated during the process, but then they just get away with it without getting caught. So currently we can still not solely rely on those online detectors to justify our academic integrities.
Yes. Yeah, which is a really interesting point, because we speak to teachers a lot, and certainly teachers in this country, I think, might be split in the way that they see this. There will be quite a few teachers who think that these detectors are pretty much 100% reliable. and are using them to try and weed out students that are using this. They might be teachers in schools, they might be teachers in universities. And then I suspect there's teachers who perhaps might read things, maybe not your whole paper, but are reading and keeping up to date with what's going on, and who understand, as you said, that even in the best case scenario, maybe 99%, maybe then with modifications and edits, students are finding ways to really drop down those accuracy rates. And ultimately, the interesting part of that, maybe for me as an ex-teacher, is if it isn't 100%, then there's always that space that we're falsely accusing students, which is a really uncomfortable position to be in. Is that something you have seen happen? Is that something you worry about, that students are being accused of using Gen AI tools to create work and they haven't?
Yes, I've seen cases where students' texts are being misclassified based on online detectors, because all those online detectors, such as GPT-0, relied on all kind of semantic features to detect if this is kind of like a machine-written style. Some students, especially second language learners for English, may be learning a specific way of writing, and maybe his writing, hers writing style might mimic those machine generated, and it's easy being flagged by the detectors as machine generated. Under this situation, I think it really depends on the teacher. If it's a more advanced approach, would include some more semantic analysis, such as the word cloud or the cosine similarities of other student written essays, to testify if the student really used ChatGPT or not. And also under this situation, I would suggest the teacher himself could utilize other approach that's not solely based on the detectors. We can also trace the history of the documents if the IT department have accessibility to those, to see if the students really write it or he basically copy and paste it and only change a few words to get away with the detector. And I would say currently the online detectors are fairly useful as a first step to tell if the texts are being written by machine or not, but it also requires further steps and attempts for the teacher by asking the student himself to see if, because I think as a teacher, it's very important for us to encourage the student first to speak out the truth if he really cheated or not in terms of ethnicity and education purposes. And also then we can use other approach to validate our original assumption if the student use any other tools that he's not supposed to use during the writing process.
And I see you being very sensitive there around these issues, because they are really confrontational to students and teachers, and there's a lot of conflict potentially involved here. But ultimately, I think what your paper says and what you're saying is we can never know.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to prove. Is that something you would say is your opinion on this?
I will say that currently, right now, well, because my paper, the data set and also the GPT model being used is solely based on last year's and also this year's, and also currently the generative AI are being advanced at a faster rate that we have never seen before. Let's say that GPT now is able to learn some semantic features by uploading current documents that the student has been written before, and then it's able to output more students his own writing style like outputs, and that may create further difficulties for the detectors to generate it. But also the detection algorithms are being more and more advanced by introducing more features, by learning all those current generative AI algorithms as well. So I would say this conflicts will never end, but more often as a humanities side of view, as a teacher or as an educator, if the student has been with the teacher for a long time, then the teacher will be easy to tell if there's any differences or be notified if there's any differences in the student writing style. If the student has only used ChatGPT for this single assignment and previously has written on his own, because currently still GPT is not able to mimic those grammar mistakes or those kind of sentence structures of the student's own writing yet. So I would say by introducing more advanced features and by digging deeper into certain perspectives, I would say at the end of the day, it will be able for us as coders or researchers to put out more advanced algorithm to detect those tasks. Yes.
So it's interesting there that you suggest that this arms race that's going on between the algorithmic detectors and the generators of this content is I guess going to get more and more sophisticated. But your conclusion there is that that there will be a more advanced algorithm.
Yes.
I guess the question for me is, do you have a feeling of where that ends? Does it get to a process where the detectors are always going to be able to detect the content, or are we stuck in this arms race now forever while there's these kind of models?
I would say the end of this arm race kind of metaphor will ends when the students always relies more on the teacher side by suggesting a more constructive usage of AI. Because I would say for the students, it's always currently nowadays it's AI usage. Maybe before the generative AI came out, before ChatGPT came out, it will be cheat based on each other's answers. I would say it's a similar situation here. I would say for the teachers, it will be encourage more transparent AI usage with disclosure requirements. Maybe the teacher may suggest the student to use generative AI to a certain degree on those assignments, or maybe there's prohibited AI usage on the other hand. By I would say by applying a multi-level approach, not only just on the detecting side, but more on the ethnicity and also the education side, it'll be easier to end this arm race. Yes.
That's really interesting, because I think what you're saying is it's important to maybe sidestep that. Nice to call it an arms race, but it's like a Cold War, isn't it, where everybody's getting better and more technology, but they're in a sense in battle with each other. To sidestep that and maybe remember what the point of education is, which we talk about on this channel being widely contested. We might not all agree on what the point of education is, but one point of view might be ultimately that students and teachers are on the same side. It doesn't feel like that a lot of the time, but everybody's trying maybe to reach a common goal, which is that students are learning things that they consider of value, that teachers and systems and nations consider of value. And one of the ways that potentially generative AI is interfering in that process, this is a conjecture that people are making at the moment, is that students are kind of outsourcing that thinking stage, the hard work stage, to the AI, which then writes the essay or produces the project plan or does the maths or even creates the art. And the problem is that the point of education is not to produce those products. If we wanted good essays, we would write them ourselves as teachers. The point of education is that students learn to do the process. And so in your discussion there, you're talking about different ways of using Gen AI, which might be much more kind of productive and collaborative with teachers. So how does that kind of square with that view that when students do use it at the moment, maybe what they're doing is switching their brains off? How could we sort of change that if we wanted to, and take a different approach?
Yes, I would say, like I suggested in the discussion part, there are various kinds of opportunities laid in the future for the students to use it if the teacher properly guided those students. I think one of the best example would be more individualized or personalized learning, because generative AI is very good at mimicking writing styles, like I said, maybe based on the student prompts, students' previous assignments, but also it's very good at mimicking the writing styles of those prompts. So maybe the students can use previous prompts in the previous years, such as in the United States, I would say AP prompts, and also maybe the generative AI nowadays is able to create his own kinds of document-based questions or long essay questions, all those based on previous years of advanced placement tests. And it's also able to do adaptive assessments by creating different kinds of prompts. So those kind of mock assessments will be very useful for the students to prepare for exams. Instead of just straightly cheating on the real exams, the students is able to prepare for himself better. And as I think, as the students feel more confident about his own capabilities and he feel prepared about the test, then he won't need to use generative AI during the exam. And also, secondly, I would say feedback and tutoring, because generative AI, in my current studies, what we do a lot with feedbacks of generative AI over writing written text, either under advanced placement setting or just general. Generative AI is very good at giving feedbacks based on the scoring guidelines. As we know that all assessments basically, as long as it's not creative writing, well, even creative writing has scoring guidelines as well. Generative AI is able to generate a set of feedbacks based on those guidelines, and it helps the students to navigate himself through. Maybe he needs to improve some grammar here. Maybe he needs to add in more details on somewhere, maybe in the second paragraph, and so on. And also, I think the third one is for the teachers or for the students as well. Like I said, it can automate some quiz questions. It can help him to test out if he missed some content. Even in math as well, maybe he can just generate some sample questions, do it. Then ChatGPT is able to give out him if he does this question wrong or right. Maybe he needs to improve certain kind of other fields of knowledge, or if there's anything that he's good with it, he doesn't need to review it anymore. So yes.
I'm just going to sort of think about some critiques of that approach. I've been reading a lot about this recently, and one of the strongest cases that's been made for AI is this personalized learning approach, as you say, adaptive. And yet the accuracy issue seems to undermine that argument for me, because we know that there's been some evidence suggesting that really interacting with LLMs as a non-expert leaves you in a difficult position, because you aren't able to discern whether the chatbot is giving you correct information or not. And we aren't ever able to say that these LLMs will produce 100% correct information. And so as a student, then on the end of that adaptive teaching, there will be some proportion of what you're being told that's incorrect, and you never know how much or when. What would you say to that argument?
I would say that argument is certainly true, because nowadays misinformation is kind of everywhere, especially in large language models or generative AIs, because ChatGPT sometimes is able to kind of falsify facts, or is able to generate certain false facts based on his own behavior. And due to the logic and also the nature of generative AI, it's able to frame words in a way that make people to believe that those words are true. But also, I think one useful approach or counter argument to that will be for the teachers to train a large language model based on himself, because the teacher, I think, would control more resource in terms of maybe past year's prompts, essay questions, and also sample students' writings, maybe sample answers from education institutions such as College Board and so on. Maybe the teacher is able to create a large language model specific like conversation by feeding in all those data. Then the student is able to gain more reliable information, with the teacher on his side is able to test it out if those prompts are reliable or not.
It's interesting. So the to some extent the rebuttal to that critique that you're making is that the general models, which tends to be the things that people are most used to using, are perhaps less useful within that education space because of the inaccuracies, but more bespoke, narrowly built models that have a specific purpose and specific content that they're trained on that's relevant to that purpose might be the solution, or the mitigation at least. But where does that leave this general sense at the moment of people picking up ChatGPT or equivalent Claude, whatever, as their first port of call for these things?
I would say currently, if let's say I'm using ChatGPT today, one change I've been seeing or being noticed recently is that when you ask it to back up with some resources or some sources, kind of citations, in his text, it's able to give you out various links. And I think one simple way for the students to test it out if the prompt the ChatGPT is giving is convincible, if it's reliable or not, is to click on those links. And you can notice that some of the links are not leading to any website. It's just a blank page.
Yeah.
And that tells you that ChatGPT is probably citing something that's been created on his own. And also, I think as students, it's very important for the students to tell if a resource or if a kind of a paper is reliable or not. And because later in his career, he's going to writing papers as well. So locating those reliable resources is a very important technique. I think it's the same thing to tell if a news, if it's a fake news or not. I think it's a very important skill to have currently with critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, and all those others, is to tell if a text is kind of can be validated based on those sources it's being cited from. So
yeah, I would definitely agree with that both Darren and I are former teachers, and this idea of critical thinking is super important. But my counter to that, I think, is that firstly, not all students are going to go on to do research and I guess interact with primary research papers. That's actually probably quite a small minority of students. But the second thing that I'm interested in there is, yes, students should be evaluating sources as a matter of course, and they should be thinking about when they use especially web sources, what's the kind of markers here that might suggest that this source is reliable, valid, transparent, accountable. The problem is that is already an important skill. If we then add in on top of that the possibility that the source that's been generated doesn't exist, or maybe kind of half exists or partially exists a bit but isn't exactly what was told, you're adding so much more complexity into an already complex process. That's my worry. And what we're talking about here is embedded AI in education as if that is the only reality. You know, it feels like it is right now. We're all saying, well, how do we deal with this thing that kind of has landed like a meteorite? And we're all just, you know, gathering around it saying, oh, look at that. Let's proceed, you know, as if it's always going to be there. And I think one of the questions that I'm interested in asking is taking a step back and saying, well, what if it wasn't embedded in education? What would it look like if we actually didn't just say, well, students are going to use it anyway, so we might as well, you know, work around it? And I don't know what your experience is there as a researcher, but also as a student. You know, what might happen in a situation where, for example, your faculty or your teachers said, we're not using AI anymore for anything? What would that look like for you, do you think? And is that even a possibility?
I would say currently, definitely yes, because we are the kind of generation just getting familiarized with the usage of AI. As we can see that nowadays, searching tools such as Google Chrome or Safari are now embedded with AI. When you are putting some prompts, the first answer you can see is being generated by AI. And I think we're just experiencing that. And also the current most recent studies by MIT has been shown that the over-reliance of AI kind of creates some damage or decreased activities of brain functioning. So I will say that as a new item, currently right now we're still be able to work around it. We are kind of just switching back to our old way of education because we all grew up with zero usage of AI. But as I said, there are lots of benefits with AI in education, as it saves lots of resource and time for both teachers and the students in task preparation, daily education, review process, and so on. So I would say as AI is being embedded into our daily life more and more, it's almost impossible for us to resist its current progress being embedded in education. Instead, like I said before, maybe training more specialized AI in education settings, it could be specified to certain courses. That's so, and then maybe putting out more regulations or kind of changing the data it's being fed into, specify and restricted on those data, make sure it's reliable and make sure it's being validated as good resources. That could benefit education to a better degree, I would say. Yeah.
So to return, I think, to something that stood out to me in your paper, and it would be really interesting to try and understand this. So one of the things that you said already is the initial checks on kind of raw AI produced content. These tools are relatively accurate on the different metrics you use. But when that initial output was modified, they became less accurate. I noticed that that effect didn't seem to stand out as much on the stuff modified by 8th grade students as it did with all the other modifications. And I was wondering whether you had any sort of thoughts about that, and also whether that tells us anything about the way these things could be modified or not to help the checking process.
Yes. First of all, I would like to specify out that the 8th grade modified and 9th grade modified, the students are not specifically encouraged to modify those contexts. The 9th grader could be able to be more experienced at modifying those generative texts, as the 9th grade has been exposed to a more advanced level of humanities courses and writing prompts. And also during that time, it might be the 2nd or 3rd year, they are able to experience the usage of ChatGPT or other kinds of generative AI. As compared with the 8th grader, it might be their first time to getting around with those writing prompts and writing those long essays. So they might not be able to notice those kind of machine-like style features, and may not be able to change it. That could be one plausible explanation to this discrepancy in the accuracy scores. But as I said, even the 8th grader who are not being strongly encouraged to change the original text, the accuracy still dropped significantly by changing even just a little bit of the text. Yes.
So a tricky question on that one then. So you're saying you didn't encourage them, but you did. I guess you did ask them to as part of the study.
Yes, I did ask them to. So basically the whole process is we gather the certain amount of essays from the whole data set. We randomly draw, and then we ask the students to modify those texts. But we did not ask to what degree. We did not ask them to, you have to completely change, or if you have to notify all those texts. What I mean by not strongly encouraged to is that we did not give them any external motivation. We did not kind of reward them or award them to what extent they change those texts. So some students may seem less motivated to change the text, as the whole purpose of this study is to kind of mimic a real life application, where some of the students may be less motivated to change its text as well. By seeing what ChatGPT generated. We did not change any student-written text. We just straightly put it into the detectors. So that's what I mean by not encouraged.
I see. Yeah. So what did you tell them the purpose was of the modifications they were making?
The purpose, what I told them is, so here's a text being generated by machine or by ChatGPT. Please modify this into using what a human will write, or we're using that you will write. So kind of mimic your own writing style. Yes.
I see. And did you take any quantitative measures of things like how many changes, whether they added or omitted words, things like that?
To this purpose of study, I did not, because this, as you can see, the models that's being implemented in this study is kind of a robust number. We did not only include a support vector machine or a lecture. First, the first step of this study is we kind of try out all the state-of-art models, and then we try different modification methods. Due to the time constraints and the resources that we have, we did not test it out. But as you say, it will be a very good quantitative measurements to see to what degree, maybe to high. I will assume that currently, I will assume that maybe the more the student changes, maybe it will lead to a lower accuracy. But I cannot conclude that. Maybe it's only just a few words, and it's able to, as I said, some words just serve as flags for detectors, and maybe it's only changed that few words could lead to a significant drop in the accuracy.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good model. All right, we'll talk about flags. I want to get onto that. But the difficult question here then is, in terms of the ethics of doing the study, do you think that there's a risk that in asking those students to make those modifications to the essays, perhaps whether they understood or not that that was supposed to be evading detection, do you think there's a risk that you were doing ethical harm there by basically showing them different ways they might be able to cheat, or encouraging them in some way to do that in the future? They might not have thought of it on their own, essentially, is what I'm saying.
I would say yes, that would be a ethical challenge. But as I said, we did not tell them that this is for assessments. We did not tell them that this is or we tell them that this is for study. And also we didn't give them we did give them writing prompts, but we didn't not say that the essay is being scored, because we are not doing any automated scoring task here. The data set originally is being used for automatic scoring. We just tell them that here's a sample text that student write based on this prompt. And we just ask, we did not, I would say to certain level, we might encourage the students to change the ChatGPT text to evade detection. But we did not tell them the part is that we are going to use detectors to detect if it's still written by the machine. So I think that part will save us a lot of ethical burden or stress.
I see.
Yes. If you,
yeah. So let's talk about these sort of flags, because I think lots of teachers will be desperate to know. You've done some work on this. In your experience, what are some of the most common markers of text that's been written by an LLM?
I would say, based on my experience, well, I cannot give you a whole list from my mind currently. I would say one of most popular examples, or one of the examples from my own experience, will be words such as underscore. And this is one word that are not being typically used by human, like by us. I think in our paper we would rarely use this word, but in GPT or generative AI related models, it's frequent words being used to replace, such as indicate or kind of tell us. ChatGPT seems to generate using a higher level of words compared with our normal human. So I would say those kind of serve as flags. But on the other hand, current online platforms such as Quillbot or other humanizers are telling those, changing those flags into easier or paraphrasing it into easier words, such as maybe it's underscore at first, Quillbot changes to tell, or maybe shows that, and those kind of by changing those flags, it significantly drop the detection rates by detectors as well. So yes, I would say some of the flags, yes, we can tell that those are written by machines, but then the humanizers are also identifying those flags, and they are learning as well. So it's not an arm race just between kind of ChatGPT and students. The students are gaining detectors, and the students are gaining some tools to evade detection as well.
Yeah.
And presumably the companies producing the LLMs are well aware of these flags and will themselves start to build the humanizers in to their own algorithms.
Yes, because we can see that GPT humanizer is already embedded in the OpenAI, the ChatGPT platform. And also, as I said, the original intention of ChatGPT or any other generative AI model is not to create academic challenges or academic disintegrity. Maybe and also the sole purpose of the GPT humanizer is to increase or improve the quality of those texts, so it's could be applied into real life. So yes.
I would counter that with I don't know if you've heard this phrase or this model, but the purpose of a system is what it does.
Yes.
And so regardless of any stated intention, currently one of the most large use cases of something like ChatGPT is to cheat in education, right? And so the purpose of that system is currently what it does. And so I'm interested in that gap between the hype, which says generative AI has the potential to transform education for the better. I've heard so many things that say it will reduce teacher time, it will improve student learning, and yet on the ground what we're seeing is actually a huge amount of problems. This is just one of them, and it's actually making things potentially much more difficult for teachers right now. I think you're hopeful about that changing, but I'm interested in how you see everything sort of changing in the landscape of education.
Yes, based on my own perspective, I would say the introduction of generative AI currently in the education is the same thing as we can see the introduction of either television or phones into our real life. As we can see that the introduction of maybe iPhone in the education is also semi drastic, and also it changed the whole landscape of education. As we can see that now we have iPhone, we have iPad, computers, and all those. And at first, iPhone or even like TikTok, at first that when it comes in, or other short video platforms, seems to be worried as people to a certain degree, that we are saying that all the kids or the students are being fed with harmful content or negative content in terms of education. But now slowly then we see our progress, or we see a change. Then we see positive content being produced by different producers, and also with the proper usage of electric devices such as computer. Like right now we're using Microsoft Teams to have such an interview. Well, some people could argue that computers are being used to play video games or watch other stuff, which wasted students a lot of time as well. I would say it's the same classical argument between the proper usage of the devices, and also maybe it's being actual use. As you said, the purpose of the system is what it does right now. But then I'm fairly positive, and I'm hopeful that, as I said, by the efforts from both the teachers, the education institution, and also the student themselves, with more studies like MIT conducted earlier in the year, that if the students find out that the frequent usage of AI could damage our own brain functions, the students themselves would find out that there are alternative ways to learn better with generative AI to achieve the same academic purpose without getting those shortcuts.
So I think the way you framed that there is really interesting, of the academic purpose, because I really want to have that optimistic view that you have of people looking at their education and saying, oh, actually, I'm not learning as much as I could do by doing this. I'm going to use it in a different, more effective, more ethical, constructive way that allows me to maximize my learning potential in this environment. But I guess my counter there would be that we operate in a system where education is incredibly expensive and is also highly credentialized. And so the risks of not using AI tools to shortcut the academic process is potentially much higher than the reward of higher level of learning that you could achieve with it. So do you fear, have you seen in your experiences with students differences between the students who have that kind of lofty academic mindset and the students that are doing their studies as a gateway to the next stage, the gateway to the career, an investment that isn't necessarily linked specifically to learning?
Yes, I would say I do see cases where the students are using generative AI, but are able to just get around with it without actively learning the material or learning the way that education is intended. But also, I think we can see that currently most of the education institutions are trying to on the one side, I would say the responsibilities and the influence of the education institution is by switching different education approaches, such as like assignments redesign, by putting out less and less, maybe just simple as writing essays, for more to like maybe presentation or short interviews, or like conversations or discussions which cannot use generative AI to shortcut those, or maybe generative AI could help you by preparing semi like a transcript, but then on the stage you cannot just use generative AI to do all the tasks for you. So I would say on one side, education, the schools are doing their parts already, but also on the other side for the students, I would say maybe currently the students is able to get away without it not being caught. But like I said, the purpose of education should never just be getting shortcuts. The same thing with our career, with our life as well. Getting shortcuts might save you some time right now, but then it's going to cost you more time in the future. That's kind of my own personal opinion. I would say that. So right now I cannot conclude if the students will suffer in the future, but that's what I think is that the student might just not learn as much as other students who didn't use ChatGPT or other generative AI on the same assignments. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the evidence supports that view. As you say, at the moment, there's lots of interesting studies coming out at the moment about the actual process of learning and thinking, which to some degree could be shortcut by using AI, but actually, what's the point then? What are you actually getting out of that process, either as a teacher or as a learner? Yeah, can we just return to the paper? I've had this burning question that I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
And what I'm interested in is you mentioned the agreement of the models with human raters. So I would love to know how you kind of went about seeing whether the human raters in the study were able to identify text that was written by Gen AI, if that's what you mean by that. And if that's what happened, were they any good at it? And why does agreement with humans matter in this context? I was interested to know sort of why you would measure that rather than just measuring if the detection models were good at detection.
I would say to back up your question, I would say the part where I meant by two raters, do you refer to the part where I talk about the quadratic weighted kappa score? Is that the part, or?
Well, so in the introduction, you talk about there's
yes.
An assessment of model agreement with human raters.
Oh, yes.
And then you have a measure of how closely some of the models that you assessed agreed with human raters. So talk me through a bit more of the kind of method of that. How did the human raters rate the essays, and what were they rating? Was it just straightforward whether they considered it to be written by AI, or are you talking about actually assessing as like a teacher?
In this, because this paper, as I said before, is not for the purpose of automated scoring. So it's just a solely kind of classification task for the teachers to tell if this one is being assessed by AI or not. Yes. So it didn't like really like score the paper. Well, there are scores based on the same data set, because this one is a public data set used in the Kaggle data science competition. So there are truly scoring guidelines. That's why we choose this data set, because it has a vast number of texts. But in this study, no, they did not score the quality of the text.
But did the humans involved in the study at any point try and see whether their judgment was correct? Like, did the humans try and judge whether the text had been written by AI, humans, or modified?
Yes. This part of what we did is we only did it to the original text. That's why we kind of did not include it in the final section, because what we find out is that after because this study is kind of a long time experiment, and that after the students, it's extremely hard for us to encourage the students to modify those tags to a kind of a certain degree that they wanted to be modified with their kind of daily school activities and everything. At the time that we collect those samples back, the teachers that we asked to do the same job as before is not available, because we want to maintain the same standard accuracy in identifying those tags. We decided not to include the results in the result tables, because we cannot just hire two different other teachers to tell if the modified text is written by human or
I
not.
see.
If we use the periods too. Yes.
And were the humans any good at identifying the AI written text?
In the original text, I
Yes.
would say yes, because like I said, in the original text, maybe just untrained human, based on previous studies, past studies, we can see that even for untrained human, the detection rate is fairly high compared with modified text. Because like I said, there are some flags being kind of notified by the detectors, but also the humans are able to color with some semantic features of machine generated that we can see that a human won't write like that. And also for a more advanced level of human such as humanity teachers, with their rich experience working around the history and humanities departments, they're able to tell more writing style differences in the students by just seeing the human written text and the machine generated text. Yes.
And so there's a really interesting ethical conundrum there, right? Which is that if humans are performing similarly to the models, or in some cases better, but certainly around the same sort of level at detecting false ones, and making those claims about student work that we talked about at the start with the kind of the precision and the recall of the models as to the false positives and the false negatives and the implications of that. If teachers are operating at a similar level of accuracy to the models, then what are the implications around that accountability with the false accusation? Like the teacher is able to explain their reasoning and enter a dialogue with the student about what the flags were for them in that work, and has to stand by that decision. Whereas if you've just run it through a detector, the reasoning behind that decision is in a black box and unknown. Do you have any sort of sense on or any thoughts about that kind of ethical dilemma?
Yes. I've been personally experienced with multiple kind of academic disintegrity cases with that. I would say detectors at this current stage is also able to generate a semi explanation of why it kind of flagged this text as being machine generated. And I think detectors, online detectors, are very useful in large scale assessments, such as advanced placements, where maybe we do not have that large number of teachers at telling if this text is written by students or written by machine. We can just train a detector to run it through the first steps. And the second step, then maybe the teacher, we can put in more resource to ask a teacher to ready notify some of the examples. And a teacher is definitely, I would say, more approachable compared with GPT or other algorithm-based detectors at providing those explanations to the students.
So the suggestion you're making then, if I understand correctly, is that the AI tool could be used as effectively a filtering system,
Yes.
and the teachers make the final, review that decision, make their own decision or their own conclusions around what's in front of them.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that point and talk about bias. So you raised the point here and in the paper about some of the real failings of these types of detection models being, for example, with students for whom English is not their first language, if the essay happens to be in English. I presume that works with all languages. And so there's something there about second or third language learners being penalised more, where they're already likely on the end of some kind of systematic oppression anyway, for various reasons. This then cuts across that and underscores it. There you go, I'll use it. But also there are going to be other types of bias in this kind of detection model, because what's happening is students who will be more exposed to the kind of LLM generated text. So it might be students that just happen to read the internet more. It might be students who are already writing these essays and modifying them, start using these words anyway. So I might use delve more because, ChatGPT loves to use the word delve. And so there's all kinds of biases that will start happening, replicating, and potentially being amplified by this detection process, right?
Yes. Yes, we can see that there's after using the ChatGPT more, or even using the GPT humanizer more, we can see that there's got to be some certain changes in the student writing style as they intentionally avoid the usage, like I said, maybe underscore or delt in their own writing because they are afraid that it will be serve as a flag for the detector to tell if the text is being written by machine or by GPT related generated AI models. So this is another challenge as we've seen by those popular online detectors. As I said, they are not 100% reliable. Some of the words are being flags. So maybe the teachers should not rely on those 100%. Instead, we should use it as a multi-level degree, as we can first use it as a filter, and then the teacher could himself, he could double check with it. I think by implementing this step, maybe the students are able to learn at a better level by that they can feel assured that certain words, even though being served as flags, they can still use it in their writing, as their teacher will not report them for academic disintegrity by double checking the text. Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on that disintegrity point just as we kind of come to a close. I think it's true to say that in the context that we're familiar with, which would be England and schools, at the moment, there isn't a lot in terms of guidelines, guardrails, and policies about that kind of thing. So often, and this is the case so often, teachers are left to kind of fend for themselves. Maybe come together as a department and discuss these things, but write their own policies, come up with their own ideas about how to deal with these issues. Perhaps universities tend to have a little more structure. But teachers now in the position of perhaps thinking about this much more than they were previously. We always knew that students cheated. we did, but perhaps it was happening less before. And as you say, it wasn't as easy, it wasn't as quick. They were copying from each other potentially, and some of that might have been quite productive at times, who knows. But students have always cheated, but now they're probably cheating more than ever, and they're cheating in ways that are more problematic than ever. I think that's true. So I'm thinking about the sort of potential, where do we go from here in terms of the future around this idea of academic integrity and what that even means in the age of AI? What do you think about that?
I would say we definitely need kind of more regulations and more rules in around the proper generative AI usage. We kind of need a more organized structures. Especially as you suggest that it's a kind of similar situation, I would assume in the United States as well, because in lower level schools, such as high schools or middle schools, it kind of being left with the department chair or the teachers themselves to decide if generative AI could be used in this course or not. However, I would say the kind of the same metaphor that I used before is the same with like iPhone usage or maybe usage of such as online courses, as we can see that there's some fast courses that you can serve as kind of like shortcuts to prepare for exams. I would say we kind of need to take some time currently at this step, rethink through the process, rethink through the value and morale of the education, the sole purpose of it, and then put out more regulated and better regulated policies around the usage of generative AI by properly use it to increase the efficiency and the efficacy of education in the future.
Great. I think that is an excellent and specific place to draw things to a conclusion. Certainly the idea of regulation guidance is something that we've been talking about an awful lot recently and thinking about an awful lot. So it's very interesting to hear you share that perspective too. So we will draw things to a close. All that remains to say then is thank you so much, Jack, for joining us today and talking about your paper and sharing some of your insights. Thank you to everyone for watching. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. We will put a link to the paper in the notes under this video. And that is it from us for now. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you everyone for joining us.